Hi there, I'm Jill Konrath, author of multiple business books and prolific reader. And I am here today because of some books I've read in the last year. The first one was Cross My Heart and Hope to Die by Aundria Morgan. And the second one is her newest book called Smiling is Not Resilience, an Unfinished Memoir. Now, both these books are so excellent that I really wanted to talk to Aundria to find out more about them. I find her writing is beautiful and it's raw and it always makes me think, which is why we're here, because she does make me think, and I think her books need to be exposed to a lot more people. So, Aundria, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jill.
It's you've written memoirs this time, and what compelled you to write two memoirs? First of all, one is usually a memoir. Now you've written an unfinished one, but what compelled you to write these books?
Well, for me, writing is a form of expression. I grew up in a home where we didn't share a lot of stuff. It wasn't okay to just talk about things. So I wound up keeping a lot of stuff inside. And I learned that that's not healthy. And so very young, I learned to, journal, write things out. And I think as time went on and I became an adult, wanting to express some of these things, even if for no one but myself, I sort of looked into writing. And I don't think there's any rule that says a memoir can only be one book, because even when you close that last page, life often continues for the person. So that's why there is more than one memoir at this time.
Yes, it was really fun reading the first one and then picking up from the first one and reading what's happened in your life since then. And so really for you, it's expression, personal expression, and being able to share what's gone on and make sense of it?
In part, and also just to give other people the opportunity to join in the conversation, to share their own things. I can't remember who it is that said that if you do not see or find a book that you want to read, then write it. And I knew what type of book I wanted, one that didn't have the happy ending where everyone, everything wrapped up neatly in the end. And I was not finding those books. And so that is really what got me to write it, because talking to people, I knew that people were going through things. And you need, when you are in this raw space, to be able to express it versus waiting until you can reach some place of objectivity to share your story.
I think you're right. Most books end with a happy ending, and that's not, life doesn't just kind of wrap itself into this nice little smile at the end and you go, oh, aren't we glad we're here right now? It's, and having gone through periods in my life that were less fun than others, and I think that's a nice way of saying it. When you're in that period of life, you need to know that other people have made it through, I guess.
Yeah, or have not
made it through.
And I think that's an important thing. That's frightening for some people, but not everyone does make it through. And I think it's very important to recognize that truth. It makes us uncomfortable, but the truth is not everyone does make it through.
No, that's really true.
They do need to have a voice or to be heard or to be able to say those things. And I think I know for a fact, more people connect with that part of the writing, the vulnerability, because then people tend to come to me and tell me things that they say, I've never told anyone this before.
Wow. Yeah, and I do think people need to share that stuff, because if you try to keep it inside, and it makes you even more alone in this whole wide world, if that's what is going on.
Yes, you end up crying alone. If you smile, everyone smiles with you. You cry alone.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are on the side crying alone.
Alone.
They come out and they put on a smiling face to make the people around them comfortable.
And is that why that's the title of this book? Can you explain the title then?
Well, for me, I believe my resting space is a smile. I've always been complimented on my smile since I was a child and as an adult.
Yeah.
at some of the worst times of my life, someone would come up and say, "You have the most beautiful smile," even though I was torn inside because either it was because my husband had recently committed suicide,
Yeah.
or I was going through something major. And, you know, but again, what they focused on was the smile, and people want to believe that because I can smile, that I am just fine. That somehow I have made it through whatever it is I'm going through in the moment.
Yeah. And I have a good smile too, and people oftentimes focus on that as
Yes.
well. And it doesn't mean I'm resilient. It just means that that's what I do. It is my resting state. It's interesting that you said that, but that is my resting state too.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily tell at all what's going on inside of you and what you're going through at that particular moment in life.
Right. And I think for me, most people who are using this whole resilience thing, it's more a comfort for them than for me. You know, it's the idea that they need me to be resilient. They need, especially when they hear what I've gone through, it's like, yeah, that we need everything to kind of be happy for you now. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Yeah, people do want you to be resilient. It makes them feel better if you can bounce back from everything that you've been through and smile.
Right. And also, even if you look at the news coverage today,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many stories that come up because we now need everything instantly and immediately.
Yeah.
That a reporter could be talking to someone who's gone through major tragedy, and yet 4 minutes in or 4 sentences in, they are trying to pull this rainbow out of this, you know, person's grief. And of course, that person sort of feels obligated to say, you know, whatever to make everyone else feel better. And I think how self-centered to rob this person of
You're
their
right.
grief, because we need to feel better or comfortable with this very, very uncomfortable situation.
I think you're absolutely right. And you're right with the 4-minute videos or the 30-second videos. People need a happy ending. They don't want to know that things are still in the process and you're working through it, and it, you know, you don't get up every day feeling great. So I have a question. When I started reading the book, I was reading your introduction, and you kind of have this little explanation at the beginning, and then you start your book, and the first sentence in the introduction reads, "Despite my objections, life goes on." I mean, first of all, I got to tell you, that is like one of the strongest statements that I've seen at the beginning of a book, and it pulled me in so much that I was like, whoa, where is this ride going? That's a huge statement, but tell me about it. Why did you start that way?
Well, in part, it is because people do need to know that they're stepping into my life, which has been tumultuous and difficult from the very beginning. And a little bit of a warning, like if you're going to come along, you know, you do need to be aware that I have this sort of love-hate relationship with life, because my experience, my life journey has been far more challenges than joy. And so I wrestle with that, you know. So I've always had this issue with, why is it that some of us seem to be inundated with, you know, these challenges or adversity or whatever the case may be. So you kind of know from the start that, all right, this is someone who, you know, is not necessarily talking about a happy ending.
Right.
You know, not a happy journey. You know, it's kind of like take a deep breath before you step in.
Yeah. Yes, and you continue on as you get into the book too, and do let people know that they're on the journey. But I think to those of us who are reading it, the journey is hard. Like I said, it's raw. It's hard to read. It's so realistic, and it's beautifully written, which is kind of a strange thing to say, that you can do it. And you're such a keen observer of everything that's going on. I mean, I just have to say that it's a really good, it's a good, painful story, but it's life. And I don't know, I feel like Tell us about your backstory. I mean, you know, you've alluded to some things. If you can just kind of allude to more, why, despite my objections, life goes on.
Well, what I say, I grew up in the 60s, so you think of the racial climate of the U.S. at that
Oh my.
Again, I'm someone who has always been, even as a child, just sort of hyper aware of my environment and the people around me, et cetera. Again, starting very, very young.
Mm-hmm.
So what I believe is even 3 to whatever years old, that I began to think, oh, why am I here? And looking at how much my mother struggled, looking again at the adult role models as I got a little bit older, it wasn't good. It was not good. And so one of the things I had to do early on is learn to read so that I could find some other role models in my life, which I found through writers like James Baldwin, Nikki Giovanni, you know, those folks, just to find some different role models. So again, being hyper aware of an environment that was very violent, that devalued me because of the color of my skin.
Right.
These are things I grew up with and knew, and that affects every aspect of your life. And as much as people would like to think that kids don't notice this, some of us actually do.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just the very beginning, you know, and it sort of continues on. A lot of unanswered questions in my life growing up from my mother, who kept more to herself than she actually shared. But again, she came from a generation that tends to not open up. But again, as an adult, learning about all the things that she had to go through and how many of us, the pain, well, not many, everybody, our pain ends up coming out in some way or another. And with me, a lot of it was imploding. So I was very self-destructive in that sense because I was in pain about my environment, the unfairness of the world, things that I couldn't understand, etc. I questioned why my mother did not eat meals with us as kids. She always ate separately. But of course, she was dealing with racism and things I had no idea what was going on. And as a single mother raising children, she needed this space, and you know, and in a way, I believe didn't trust herself to kind of be with us, you know, at that time because of all the things she was going through. And it just sort of continued on. So I've met adversity and challenges at various places in my life. And that's a lot of what Cross My Heart talks about, those beginnings. And they continued, you know, they continue today.
You know, your newest book, the one that I've just fallen in love with, really deals with you going back home again. After you, in one sense, you escaped the environment that you were in, and you came from where in New York
Brooklyn.
City? Brooklyn, okay. You came from Brooklyn, you ended up in Minneapolis, you went to California, and you're back in Minnesota. You're a writer, an author, you've got good jobs, you're doing a lot of good things. In one sense, you escape, and then you go home too. And what was that like?
Well, again, it was a crisis that brought me back to New York. I would have never chosen to go back to New York on my own. But as you read in Smiling is Not Resilience, one of the things that happened was I attempted suicide when I was in California. So I needed to leave there based on the people I was staying with. I needed to go. And also at the same time, my mother was diagnosed with a rare cancer and was dying.
Yeah.
And so for those two reasons, those are the only reasons I went home. And actually, I say in the book, I'm not sure that if I had not attempted suicide, I don't think I would have gone home and been with my mother during those last days. So again, it's another like major crisis or double crisis that happened.
Double crisis, yeah.
Brought me back to New York.
And so what happened inside of you? I mean, you were with your mother till the end.
Yes.
how did that change things in your life?
Well, that's kind of a huge question.
I know it is. Sorry, we've only got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
What one thought, just one.
I think I'm not sure how to quite answer that as far as what changed. Again, most of my time there was about survival of myself, because you know, I made this, you know, I was still here. But at the same time, I'm trying to help my family with my mother who is dying.
Yeah.
And I say, you can't really watch someone else. And she suffered horrifically during this. So there were many things that changed, and it was a constant struggle to focus on what I needed to survive and how I could help my family. So that was this major pull, and sometimes I had to put what I was doing to help myself aside a little bit, but I never wanted to lose sight of that because I knew I had no intentions of staying in New York. So it was challenging. It was just very challenging. So the Smiling is Not Resilience goes into a lot of what I dealt with, which again is very complex. It was multiple things going on at multiple times.
Yes, and by sharing it, you take us into your world big time, and we see what you're going through and how you're going through it, and you're right. There wasn't the happy ending. Your mom dies. Your struggle continued as you did that. As a reader, you messed with my emotions a whole lot.
Wonderful.
That's okay. That's good. Yes. And honestly, to me, it was like you were calling me to maybe be more honest in everything about life. Maybe what did you?
The point of all of it is the honesty, and it really starts with being honest with ourselves. You know, we do a lot of platitudes. We do a lot of things to make ourselves feel better in these uncomfortable situations. One, it's like, okay, be honest. If you're going to read with me, and I do say my writing is not for the faint of heart. My goal is to make you uncomfortable. My goal is to make you have those reactions, because to me, that's what a good book does.
Yes.
It doesn't stroke you. It doesn't baby you along.
No.
If you want to come along with me, you have to be willing to go beyond the surface. And that's my requirement for anyone who does it. And what I find is there are many, many who crave that desire despite this, mask that we often put on that everything is fine. So yes, that's what the book and the writing is supposed to do.
Well, you did. You stirred me up and you got me thinking about things, and you got me thinking about what I can do, what my role is, and I don't have answers. I mean, I don't have answers.
And you may not, I'm not calling you to have answers for me. It's more about really starting with self-reflection.
Yeah.
Because that's where it begins. And especially the honesty, the honesty about where a person truly is emotionally, whatever. That's the real point. And sometimes that honesty does not match up with the persona that we're putting out or the masks that we wear that say everything's okay. And so the work for everyone starts with the self. I'm not asking you to find any answers for me. That is not responsibility.
That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to find my answers and to also see other people for who they are and what they're going through, and to be open and not afraid to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
To learn. Yes. And sometimes that just simply means, listening and being a witness and not necessarily doing or solving anything.
I love that, being a witness. It's kind of how I felt as I read your book, that I was a witness to your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good. It was really good. I mean, like I said, it impacted me. It stays with me. You're still making me think. I finished it well over a month ago, and it's still in my mind.
All right.
Which is exactly, I think, what any author wants. So
yes.
Aundria, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm going to put the book up one more time. Smiling is Not Resilience, an unfinished memoir. Thank you so much for writing it and for being here today.
Well, and the book is available on Amazon.com,
Amazon?
BarnesandNoble.com as well.
Okay, I'm glad you put that in there because I forgot to say that. Thank you much. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.